Imagine this. You're dressed in your best. You've rehearsed every answer, practiced your smile in the mirror, reminded yourself you belong in that room. You arrive early, because that's what professionals do. You walk into a sleek corporate lobby filled with the quiet hum of power and polished surfaces. You're ready, focused, confident. And then you wait. Not for 5 minutes, not for 10. You wait for 2 hours. While everyone else gets called in before you. Danielle Milan had no idea that morning would become a quiet test of dignity, patience, and reality. If she had, she wouldn't have worn those sharp heels, the kind made for fast exits and first impressions, not for sitting in the same stiff lobby chair for over an hour. But at 9:45 a.m., she walked into Westbridge Corporate Plaza in Scottsdale, Arizona, with her portfolio tucked tightly under one arm, heels clicking against the polished floor, and a head full of strategy, answers, and hope. She had spent weeks preparing, mock interviews, industry deep dives, notes annotated, highlighted, rewritten. She had studied Craig Ellison, the regional manager, as if she were preparing for a deposition, not a meeting. She knew his record, his speaking style, his last published article, even the color of his tie in recent press photos. She was ready. Inside, the scent of citrus cleaner mingled with cologne that probably cost more than her entire outfit. A giant twisting metal sculpture rose near the elevators, abstract, bold, meant to impress. Danielle approached the front desk. Behind it sat a young receptionist, scrolling on a screen and chewing gum with practiced indifference. "Hi, I'm Danielle Milan. I have a 10 a.m. with Mr. Ellison," she said, offering a polite smile. The receptionist looked up, typed something with a glossy fingernail, made a quick whisper into the phone, then replied, "He'll be right with you. Please have a seat." Danielle nodded, walked toward the window seats, and sat down gently, smoothing her skirt, placing the portfolio squarely on her lap. She exhaled. The first moment of stillness. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. Still, she remained calm. She knew the game. Executives run behind schedule. Maybe he was stuck on a call, in another meeting, or dealing with a last-minute emergency. That's what important people do. That's what this world is like. You wait. But by the 30-minute mark, something inside her began to shift. She stood, smoothed her blazer, and returned to the desk. "Excuse me," she said, voice warm and professional. "Just checking in. Wanted to confirm Mr. Ellison is still available." The receptionist didn't even pretend to check this time. She just gave Danielle a flat, closed-mouth smile, the kind that feels more like a polite shutdown than a reassurance. "He said he's finishing a call. He'll be right out." Danielle returned to her seat. Only now, her back was a little straighter, her grip on the portfolio a little firmer, her breath a little tighter. Then something happened. 2 men walked into the lobby, crisp white button-downs, khakis, confident stride, laughing about a golf game like they already owned the room. And without a pause, the same receptionist sprang to her feet, greeted them with enthusiasm, offered coffee, shook their hands, led them through the doors without hesitation. Danielle sat frozen. Maybe they had appointments too, or maybe they didn't. But something about that moment felt louder than the silence around her. Like a private joke she wasn't in on. Like a room she'd been told she could enter, but only if she waited long enough, quietly enough, invisibly enough. Still, she told herself, stay calm, don't assume, don't overthink, you know better. Don't give them a reason. It was now 10:58, nearly an hour. Her foot began to ache in her heel, but she didn't show it. Her fingers fidgeted quietly, tucking into the corners of her blazer sleeves. She reminded herself of her training, of every time she was told, be patient, be professional, be twice as prepared, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be seen. But time kept slipping by, and no one came. By 11:15, the air in the lobby felt different, not just colder, heavier. like it was pressing down, reminding her that her presence didn't carry the same weight as those other men in suits. 2 more guests arrived, again, white, confident, casual. They were met with handshakes and laughter, then whisked behind the frosted doors like regulars at an exclusive club. Danielle's shoulders stayed poised, her face unreadable, but inside something cracked, just slightly. Not rage, not despair, but clarity. This wasn't about a late meeting. This was about how easily some people are welcomed in, and how others are told to wait until they either leave, break, or prove themselves 10 times over. She blinked once, then again, and kept waiting. But not the same way anymore. Maybe they had standing meetings, she told herself. Maybe they were department heads, investors, or someone higher up the ladder. Maybe they were just more important. But that excuse, no matter how rational, sat in her gut like a stone. It didn't dissolve. It just stayed there, heavy and cold. Danielle tightened her grip on her portfolio, fingers aching against the leather edge. Time no longer felt like it was passing. It felt like it was pushing against her, testing her, stretching each minute like a thin thread ready to snap. The receptionist didn't glance at her again. No nod, no smile, not even the smallest sign of awareness. It was as if Danielle had turned into part of the furniture, functional, silent, easy to overlook. But it wasn't just being ignored. It was the way she was being ignored, as if her presence there, calm, quiet, respectful, was some kind of unspoken problem, as if her very act of waiting too long, too still, had become inconvenient. People passed through the lobby like it was a private river, flowing around her without ripple. No eye contact, no acknowledgement, just clean shoes, tailored suits, and important conversations that didn't include her. Then, from the far end of the lobby, a janitor appeared. Older, moving slowly, pushing a worn cart with neatly stacked supplies. His gray hair was tucked under a faded baseball cap, and his steps echoed softly against the marble floor. He moved with the kind of patience that only comes from years of being invisible in places like this. Their eyes met, just for a second. His glance didn't judge her. It didn't rush past. It wasn't awkward or invasive. It was human. A small, quiet nod passed between them, and in that moment, Danielle felt something anchor inside her. A flicker of dignity passed wordlessly between 2 people who knew what it meant to be overlooked. She gave him a faint smile, then quickly lowered her gaze. She didn't want to seem like she was loitering, or distracting, or worse, waiting too loudly. Even now, after all this time, she was calculating every move, every shift in her chair, every breath. Because in rooms like this, perception wasn't just everything, it was survival. Minutes later, the atmosphere changed. The glass doors opened, and in walked Avery Lindstrom, Vice President of Operations. Danielle recognized her instantly. She'd seen Avery on conference panels, leadership podcasts, industry spotlights. She was the kind of woman who took up space without apology. Tall, confident, dressed in a navy blue pantsuit sharp enough to cut glass. The receptionist jumped up like she'd been hit with a jolt of electricity. "Good morning, Ms. Lindstrom. Can I get you coffee, water, anything at all?" Avery offered a polite wave without breaking stride and walked straight to the elevators like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Danielle's throat tightened. She sat up straighter again, adjusted her blazer again, tried to look like someone important again, like someone who wasn't slowly unraveling from the inside. At exactly 11:30, she stood, not hurried, not aggressive, just steady. She walked to the desk, heels barely clicking now. She smiled, polite, measured. "Hi," she said evenly. "I was just wondering if I should reschedule. It's been a while." For a split second, the receptionist blinked like she'd just realized Danielle was still there, like she'd forgotten the appointment completely. "Oh, he's just finishing a call," she repeated, offering the same strained smile. "He should be right with you." The same line, the same pause, the same nothing. Danielle nodded slightly, more to herself than anyone else, then walked back, each step slower than before, and took her seat. This time, when she crossed her legs, she felt it. Heat behind her eyes. That quiet, unrelenting burn of something held in too long. It wasn't just frustration, it was shame. Not shame she earned, but shame she'd been handed like a dirty rag and told to carry, quietly, graciously. She would not cry. She would not squirm. She would not give anyone in this building the satisfaction of seeing her break. She sat still, perfectly still. Even as the clock on the wall ticked louder than it had all morning, even as life buzzed around her, printers humming, elevator chimes dinging, muted conversations ricocheting through glass, she was still in the room. But now, it was like the room had decided she wasn't. At 11:58, she looked down at her phone again. 2 hours, 2 whole hours, and not a single honest update. No apology, no real reason. Across the room, the receptionist laughed with a delivery guy carrying lunch bags. Nearby, 2 men in sports jackets toasted with coffee cups before strolling toward the elevators. The world kept moving. And Danielle? She sat in the center of it, unmoving, unseen, like a shadow no one wanted to acknowledge. She blinked, slowly. Would they have left a white man sitting here this long? Would Craig have kept someone else waiting without explanation? Am I overreacting, paranoid? Or am I just invisible? She shifted her leg, gently stretching it to shake off the numbness. Her heel made the softest squeak against the marble floor, barely audible, but somehow it was heard. Several heads turned, flickers of annoyance, irritation, like she had disrupted something sacred. No one said a word, but their expressions said plenty. Danielle quickly uncrossed her legs and placed both feet flat on the ground, hands folded, chin lifted, breath slow. She thought of her mother, back in Little Rock, who used to say it like gospel. You gotta be twice as good, baby girl, just to get half as far. At the time, Danielle used to think it was just one of those things elders said to push you harder. You've got to be twice as good to get half as far. But now, sitting in that cold, echoing lobby surrounded by designer suits and filtered silence, those words hit differently. They didn't just feel true, they felt permanent, like a quiet law she was still being judged by. She opened her portfolio again, pretending to skim her notes. But the truth was, she wasn't reading. She was hiding the burn in her chest, hiding the sting behind her eyes, hiding the shame that didn't belong to her, but had somehow still landed in her lap. Then she caught a flicker of movement. Behind the glass doors near the desk, someone stepped out. It was him, Craig Ellison. Tall, thin, perfectly pressed shirt, clipboard under one arm, laughing about something with a colleague. There was no rush in his steps, no apology in his tone, just easy confidence, the kind you wear like a second skin when the world never tells you to wait. Danielle sat up straighter. She didn't wave, didn't speak. She just waited to be noticed. But Craig's eyes floated past her like she was a decoration, not a person, not a guest, certainly not the woman who had been sitting in that same chair for nearly 2 hours. And then, just like that, he vanished again, back through another door, still talking, still laughing, still unaware. Danielle exhaled, or maybe collapsed a little inside. Not in anger this time, not confusion, just exhaustion, the kind that builds over a lifetime and has nowhere left to go. She thought about standing up and walking out. She thought about reclaiming her time, her pride, her peace. But instead, she stayed, because walking away would have felt like surrender. And Danielle Mlan didn't surrender, not when she knew, without a doubt, that she'd earned every inch of that space. The receptionist glanced up briefly, then looked away, annoyed, as if Danielle's presence was now inconvenient, as if waiting too long had somehow become her fault. Danielle clenched her hands in her lap, jaw tight. But then in a shift, the front door swung open, and for the first time that morning, the entire room noticed. Sharp, deliberate footsteps echoed off the marble floor. Not just one set, several. A group, 5 people, moved through the entrance like they belonged to the building itself. Their energy didn't announce them. It commanded. The receptionist stood instantly, smoothing her blouse. Conversations softened. Heads turned. Danielle looked up, and her heart skipped. There, walking with calm authority, was Martin Beasley, CEO of the entire company. And beside him, Sandra Whitlock, Senior Director of Finance. Danielle had seen them speak at national leadership conferences. They weren't just decision makers, they were career makers. She froze, unsure whether to stand, but before she could move, Sandra spotted her and smiled. A real smile, warm, sincere, familiar. "Danielle Milan," Sandra called across the room, her voice clear and confident. "I didn't know you were coming in today." The sound of her name bounced off the lobby walls. Every head turned, even Craig's, and for the first time all morning, everyone saw her. Danielle rose slowly, measured, graceful. She slipped her portfolio under her arm, not to protect herself now, but as a quiet badge of readiness. Her heels tapped a steady rhythm as she crossed the floor, calm as ever. Martin Beasley stepped forward first. "It's good to see you again, Danielle," he said warmly, extending a hand. "We were just talking about your presentation at the summit last week. Outstanding work." Danielle shook his hand, smiling with composed confidence. "Thank you, Mr. Beasley. That means a lot." Behind them, Craig Ellison had gone completely still, his mouth open just slightly, a flicker of confusion, maybe disbelief, before he scrambled forward, color rising in his face. "Ms. Milan," he blurted, his voice too loud, too eager. I'm so sorry for the delay. We had a situation come up, totally unexpected. No excuse, really. I apologize personally." Danielle turned to him, her face unreadable. Her voice was low, even, but it carried. 2 hours is a long time for a situation, Mr. Ellison." Martin raised an eyebrow. Sandra folded her arms, watching. Craig flushed deeper. He stammered something about back-to-back calls, about emergencies, but no one was listening, because all eyes were now on her, on the woman who had waited, who had been overlooked, and who, in the end, had never needed to raise her voice to be heard. Sandra stepped closer, touching Danielle's elbow lightly. "If you're free, Danielle, we're heading up to the executive conference room. We'd love your input on a few key projects." Danielle gave a gracious nod. "I'd be happy to." Craig tried to step forward again, mumbled something about coffee, about carrying her bag, but Danielle had already turned, her shoulders straight, her stride unshaken. And this time, the elevator doors didn't close without her. They closed because of her. Whatever she needed in that moment, Danielle didn't have to say it. She simply adjusted her stance, ever so slightly, aligning herself beside Sandra and Martin, leaving Craig Ellison standing awkwardly behind, exposed by his own neglect. And as they moved together toward the elevators, Danielle didn't look back. But she could feel him. That same man who had ignored her for 2 hours was now staring at her like she had stepped out of a different world. His embarrassment clung to her back like the Arizona sun, hot, heavy, inescapable. For the first time that morning, Danielle allowed herself a quiet smile, small, private, just for her. But what Craig didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that this was only the beginning. The real consequences of that morning hadn't even started yet. Upstairs, the executive conference room felt like a different universe. The air was easier to breathe. The greetings were genuine. The energy didn't hum with polite dismissal. It pulsed with real interest. Danielle wasn't just a forgotten appointment anymore. She was the room. Martin slid a folder across the table toward her. "We're developing a new leadership initiative," he said. "Still in the early stages. But after what we saw at the summit, we'd like you involved, possibly leading a key part of it." Danielle opened the folder carefully. Inside, timelines, strategy drafts, budget approvals. This wasn't a meeting. This was an invitation to the table. Sandra leaned in, her voice steady and sure. We need more people like you, Danielle. People who recognize blind spots before they become problems. People who lead without stepping over others to do it. Danielle absorbed every word, not as flattery, but as fact. She had the track record to back it, the work ethic, the vision. She asked direct questions, offered sharp suggestions, and for the first time in a very long time, people weren't just listening out of obligation. They were listening with respect. Across the glass wall, just visible from the edge of the table, Craig hovered near his office, glancing toward the conference room, watching. He looked smaller now, and for the first time, uncertain. Danielle met his gaze once, calm, clear, steady. She didn't look away. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply looked, and then turned back to the real conversation in front of her. After an hour, Martin stood and offered his hand again. Think it over, he said, but I'll be honest, I'd love to have you in this role. Danielle shook his hand firmly. I appreciate the opportunity. I'll give it serious thought. Sandra walked her to the elevator. Just before the doors opened, she said casually, by the way, if you ever feel mistreated here, you come straight to me. No middlemen. Danielle paused, then smiled, soft, knowing. Thank you, Sandra. I'll remember that. The elevator doors closed, and behind them, Craig stood alone, pretending to sort through papers he wasn't reading. What Danielle didn't know yet, what she couldn't have known, was that the moment she stepped into that elevator, a quiet shift began spreading across the building. And it didn't stop. The following week, an official offer letter arrived. The leadership initiative wasn't a side project. It was a direct path to a regional executive role. Higher pay, greater responsibility, real influence, a chance to shape what the company would become. Danielle accepted, not for validation, not for revenge, but because she had earned it. Every long night, every overlooked email, every silent dismissal she'd swallowed without complaint. That same morning, the announcement of her promotion went live, and across the office, Craig Ellison was called into a closed-door meeting. Whispers started, in break rooms, by elevators, in Slack threads and hushed conversations. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. One too many delays, one too many complaints, one too many women, especially women of color, left waiting in lobbies like afterthoughts. By Friday, Craig's nameplate was gone from his office door. Danielle didn't cheer. She didn't post a quote. She didn't say a word. She moved forward, step by step, the same way she always had. Her first big leadership meeting was packed. Department heads, senior managers, new hires. Danielle stood at the head of the table in a slate gray skirt and a crisp white blouse. No armor needed. She clicked to the first slide and looked up. Good ideas, she said calmly. Don't care where they come from, and neither should we. The room leaned in and listened, because this wasn't about one morning anymore. It was about how many mornings had been just like it, unnoticed, unspoken, unchallenged. Danielle's rise wasn't about ego. It wasn't even about her. It was about the quiet promise she'd made to herself sitting in that lobby for 2 hours, surrounded by silence. I will not let them decide my worth. I will not shrink to fit into rooms I was meant to lead. And for every young woman coming behind her, especially the ones who looked like her, Danielle was making sure they wouldn't have to wait nearly as long to be seen. Because the truth is, sometimes people won't recognize your value until someone else does. But that doesn't mean your value wasn't always there. So if you're watching this, hold your ground. Stay ready. Your moment will come. And when it does, walk into it without apology.